Good day. Good day, and welcome to today's devotional. Wasn't able to get on yesterday for various reasons, but here we are today, and so we're going to take a look at our next verse. Also, a heads up: tomorrow I should be hopefully I'll be able to get on, and Friday we'll just have to see. We have a hurricane coming up the coast, and so we'll see what happens on Friday. I think it's not supposed to hit us till Saturday, but anyway, we'll see. They're unpredictable, aren't they? Or somewhat, at least. Anyways, for today, we are in Proverbs chapter 6, verse 34. Now, we've been working our way through this, and the story that's unfolding in these verses in this part of chapter 6 of Proverbs, it's the consequences of a person having an affair with his neighbor's wife, right? So the idea, it's telling us not to do that, but then it's saying because here's a bunch of reasons why you shouldn't do that, and the response or the outcome will be really bad, and so that's kind of what it's focusing on. Verse 34 is kind of emphasizing the passion that the husband of that woman is going to feel. And so we'll read the verse and then we'll just talk a little bit about one idea that comes out of it. So verse 34, it says, "For jealousy enrages a man, and he will not spare in the day of vengeance." And then in verse 35, it's kind of the continuation of that thought, but we'll do that tomorrow. But the thought there of just how if you do certain things or certain crimes you could do or certain sinful things, wrong things you could do, that a person you may have consequence for, but the person won't be enraged against you. But there are some things like this, like cheating on a man's marriage, cheating and taking his wife. That will create a rage in that guy because jealousy enrages a man. That sense of jealousy, and so that's what we're going to try and focus a little bit today. I want to talk about this idea of jealousy in marriage, and maybe, well, once again, I'm going to probably conflict with the world's version of that, the world's views on that. But we're looking at the Bible and what God thinks. So this idea of jealousy and in a marriage, is jealousy right or wrong in a marriage? So to start off with, I got to talk about a couple other words like envy or coveting. These are clearly wrong things. Anywhere in the world, really not really supposed to be. We're not supposed to be covetous. And so, one of the 10 Commandments is not to covet anything your neighbor has. And so, the idea of it mentions, his servants or his animals or his household or anything he has. But it mentions specifically his wife, which is interesting because in this case, what we're talking about is a man who commits adultery with his neighbor's wife, right? Because of coveting, right? The coveting is the problem there. He wanted that, and he went after it. So it is not restricted, of course, just to marital situations, but coveting anything is not good. So the Bible says, don't be coveting, don't be wanting somebody else's stuff, right? Envy is a similar thing. Is the idea of having a kind of a competitive nature with somebody where you see them as having a superior state than your own. And so you want that state for yourself instead of them. So it's very similar. And that kind of thing, envy, is often what we think about when we use the word jealousy. And we think about somebody who's kind of like has an emotional dissatisfaction with somebody else's success or their things or whatever, and so we see jealousy kind of in that light as an envy kind of a thing, and that's one thing. But the jealousy being talked about here in verse 34 is a different use of the same word in English. And if you look it up in in a dictionary or some etymological place, you'll find out jealousy has this idea of envy, it does, but also has this idea of being fiercely protective of your rights, of your right over something, your right. And so in that sense, it's the same word we use in English, but it has a different meaning. And it's not just envy. Envy, it's not just like they have something I want, but rather I have something I don't want to lose. And that jealousy is what this is talking about. And in case you didn't know, that jealousy is not wrong, right? And biblically speaking, it's not wrong to have a fierce protection of your right over something that's an actual right. Now, we're not talking about some invented right, but an actual right over something. God describes himself as being a jealous God, right? Fiercely protective of his right, right? His right to glory or his right over you, his right, he fiercely protects it. He's jealous of it. And so that's not a wrong thing. That's not a sinful thing to have that kind of jealousy. That idea of defending one's right or defending one's proper place. In a sense, you could say anybody whoever wants to protect their good name Well, if you're a good person and you really are a good person, you have a good name, then of course you want to be jealous of your name. You want to make sure that my name isn't mistreated, that people don't apply something wrong to my name. So you can be said to be jealous of your name. And that's a good thing. That's a proper thing. And it should be. Now I'm having a computer freeze. I hope that's not stopping the video. Uh, anyway, I will continue and hope that everybody can still see me. Um, so what happens with regard to marriage? Let's just move to this idea. So with regard to marriage and a man being jealous of his wife, should that be a thing? Well, I would argue that biblically speaking, yeah, absolutely should be a thing. That God designed marriage as a union of two people. And so because it's a union of two people into one person, there is a right that each member, man and wife, this is spoken in Proverbs here from the perspective of the male, but both directions, man and wife, have a oneness that they're supposed to have. And so there should be a desire to protect that, a jealousy to that. Is it wrong to be jealous of your wife? No, it's not. Is it wrong to be envious of your wife? Well, that kind of jealousy? Well, sure. Why would you be envious of your wife? Why wouldn't you want her to succeed? But if we're talking about this protective right, then of course a man should be jealous for his wife, and a wife should be jealous for her husband. There should be a protectiveness there that says that we have a bond, and we belong to each other. Now, once again, in our current era, there's a lot of opposition to that idea, especially the idea of owning someone. We talk about, you don't belong to anybody. And once again, I'll say, biblically speaking, actually, you totally do. You do belong to people. Children belong to their parents. Parents belong to their children. We belong to God. God belongs to us. There's a sense of a social understanding, a relational understanding that we call belonging. We don't mean chattel property in the way that I own my glasses here, right? Like, yeah, these are mine, but that's not the same. That's not a relationship. That's a thing. But in relational status, yeah, we belong to each other. It can be said that my wife is mine. She's mine. And it can be said that I am hers, right? I belong to her. And so, of course, there's a sense of ownership there. And with that ownership comes rights, things that I have a right to certain relational privileges with my wife, and she has a right to certain relational privileges with me. No one else has those rights. Like, that's exclusive between us because of the covenant of marriage, because of the oneness that comes in marriage. Marriage, by God's view, not the world's, but by God's view, marriage is the binding together of two people into a state of oneness. And the Bible is so strong in this idea of marriage being this binding together into a state of oneness, that it says that God put that together. It actually says what God has put together, and referring to marriage. And God himself sees it, that when a man and a woman marry, and the bond that comes from that he has put that, even if they don't know that it's happened, it was God that brings that bonding together and that oneness. And so the Bible goes on to say, so therefore, whatever God has put together, don't let any man separate. Right? We should not ever get in the way of that bond and separate that in some way. So a man, and back to our proverb, a man who goes and has an affair with his neighbor's wife is separating that. He is getting into the middle of that and pushing apart that bond that God put together. And so it's right that both members, both the male and the female in that marriage, should have a jealousy for one another. And no, you're not allowed into the middle of this. This is exclusive to us. We are one. The covenant of marriage means that the woman does belong to the man, and it means that the man does belong to the woman. And it is not wrong that a person would be somewhat enraged, rightfully enraged or angry, we could say, because of that bond. Our society wants to destroy that. And so a lot of these things that the Bible will talk about and ways that we should treat our husbands and our wives or our relationships in marriage are confusing to the world today, because the world has decided that marriage is really just sort of a convenience thing, that two people who want to have certain I don't even know what they get out of it, but I suppose they get to take pictures at their wedding, or they get to tell the world they have a husband or a wife, I suppose. But they don't think that there should be any obligations to go with it. And so there's a sense there that marriage is almost just like a kind of a temporary title you put on, like a Halloween mask you wear once a year. And it's now I'm being really facetious, I suppose, but that's it's degraded the level of what marriage is. Marriage should be in a society upheld to a high degree of honor. Once again, the Bible says that the marriage should be held in honor by all. That there should be a sense that marriage is this special union, unique to these two people, and no other person in society should ever get in the middle of that and create division in that union. And so, as this verse says, if you do, well, then that jealousy that man would have for his wife, or should be vice versa, will be intense, and you won't be able to stop it. Now, of course, if that person is corrupt in their thinking, then maybe they won't get enraged. But then, do they really have a marriage? I don't know what to make of that. Anyway, that's some of the thoughts from today. Just trying to apply it to our world today. I would once again encourage you to remember the consequences of our sin. That's what this is talking about, and why we should avoid it, of course. But just a few thoughts about how our culture sometimes faces some of these things and how we flip it on its head when we really shouldn't. If you're married, you should have a good, healthy jealousy for your spouse. The jealousy I'm talking about here today, a sense of union with your spouse. And I would really encourage you to build that and foster that. So, and not to mess up somebody else's marriage. It's an important thing. To bless other people in their marriage. God help us do it. God willing, we'll see you tomorrow for verse 35. And hope you have a good day. Take care.